Welcome to Toot Your Own Horn, Music Matters. Today I'm here with Daniel Brinkley. Hello, Daniel. How are you?
I'm well, Lisa, and you?
Very good. I am very excited for you to share with our audience today how you chose your instrument. Would you tell us your story?
Yeah, so my dad was actually a band director. And he still is a band director. He's a middle school band director. So as long as I can remember, we've had musical instruments in the house. Now, my dad's a brass guy, and so I grew up watching him play the euphonium and learn all of the brass. And he was actually finishing college when I was 3 or 4. So my earliest memories were him preparing for his senior recital and getting his first teaching job. And for a while there, I was just like gun ho to like start playing an instrument and did the same thing that every kid does and, try to make a sound out of it by screaming through it. And then eventually getting taught how to do a buzz and then learning more and more about different instruments. And he actually started me out when I was 7 on trombone.
Oh my gosh.
And yes, he actually started me out on trombone when I was 7, was able to like do the first 3 positions, get a tone, and play. And then we eventually inherited a few instruments that was his grandfather's, which was a tenor saxophone, and there was a bassoon that still isn't in playing condition. So I messed around with saxophone, but being 10 wasn't quite big enough to play the tenor sax. And then one day he came home with a flute, and I was like, that's interesting. And get to 5th grade band, and we have what our school like to call instrument petting zoo.
Yeah.
And yeah, we go through and try all the instruments out. And I was never interested in percussion. I tried out the trombone, try out the trumpet, struggled with that, thought I was going to be a brass player, and then tried the saxophone, was told, you sound great on that. However, let's try the flute out. And for some reason, something clicked with the flute. And I kept on playing flute for the first year and a half of band. And I was kind of the problem child in my own dad's own band class, being because I would advance so quickly. So I'd
Oh,
get bored. So played flute for like a month in there. And then he said, okay, here's a saxophone. Picked up saxophone pretty easily, was not interested in clarinet, so I just kind of bounced back and forth. Would pick up my friend's clarinet and get in trouble, of course. And then they get an oboe in and they say, how about you try this? And I tried an oboe and it was not a very good quality oboe and struggled a bit. So I was focusing on learning flute the best I can, and then learning oboe, and then eventually they got me set up with a decent oboe for me to play on, and then things started to click with oboe, and I just loved it. I loved it. I of course played flute for marching band stuff and all of that, and then but I still struggled, and then I what was probably my 6th grade year or 7th grade year. My parents sent me to High Plains Band Camp at Fort Hays State University up in Kansas, and I got to play with other oboists, which was really cool to me, and actually learn how to blend, and was given a handmade reed for the first time and took a reed making class. I remember my first reed very well because that it was one week. They taught us how to wrap our first reeds, and I remember having all of these threads laid out, and I picked a blue thread, wrapped my first reed on there, and then Kay Worth, the instructor there, finished the reed for me, and I got to go home with a reed I helped make.
oh,
And and I was sold on oboe at that point. Like there's nothing else I wanted to play unless if I had to play something else, which I played flute and marching band
mhm.
for high school. And I was fortunate, and up till that point, I was very close to just giving up because it was hard. I made all of the noises that they joke about for beginning oboists, like you sound like a dying duck or a dying goose and
Right.
all of that. But I got to see these guest professionals come in and play a oboe English horn duet or a octet was played or quintet, and I was just like, that's it. That's what I like. And my biggest struggle was getting lessons, because I grew up in Dodge City, Kansas, and there were no oboe teachers in the area. My nearest oboe teacher was 2.5 hours away at Fort Hayes, and got to talking with my parents and said, I really want to take lessons. And we reached up to Kay Worth, and she fortunately was very kind enough to actually say, you have to drive 4 hours just for a lesson, 2 hours here, 2 hours back. If you're dedicated, I'll give you lessons for free if you buy reeds from me.
Oh, wow.
And that was the biggest like impact for me, was just the community that we get as musicians of, you're worth it, so I'll give you a try.
That's awesome. Now, but
Mhm.
this
And that
get
and that was just up till middle school at that point.
oh, wow. And so I assume
Mhm.
at this point you were no longer a distraction or you were a problem in the band because you were busy learning oboe.
I was busy learning oboe. I was digging in the solo cabinet trying to find something that was my level, or to push myself and challenge myself, auditioning for all of the state bands. And of course, competing against everyone else in the state was a challenge for me, because I wasn't the best, but I was the best where I was.
Mhm. And
Mhm.
so were you then really committed going into high school? Like were you sure
Yeah,
you had to keep playing or what happened then?
I was very committed. In fact, after that my seventh grade year of school, I played oboe all year long that year. That was my first year where I just played oboe all year long, except for when we did mock parades and stuff, then pulled out the flute. And I still love my flute. In fact, my parents offered to, that was one of the first big purchases I made. So there's a guy at the pawn up at a pawn shop that my dad did a lot of business with and helped, and he'd say, hey, he has these instruments, and there was an open hole flute that I really wanted, and I mowed yards all summer, and my parents paid for half of it and I paid for the other half, and then I earned the flute. And that was my first big instrument purchase. And then my eighth grade year, my parents helped me they gave me the option of, would you like a car or an oboe? And I sat there and thought about it, because I was like, I just learned how to drive. I would like a car. But I really thought about it and thought I would like the oboe, because an oboe is going to get me further in life than a car, because I can get scholarships, and I was actually had been playing with the city band, which was my first big paycheck that I was getting. So I was getting paid to play in the city band as a 14-year-old, and thought it was really cool. And I was playing with my band directors, and my dad was the director, and I was playing with people from the community and other professionals, and it was a very exciting time. And then more of my friends started joining that band, so just got to play in the band all the time, just always playing.
That's a great story.
Hmm.
I love the idea that the oboe was more valuable than a car.
Hmm.
That's great. That's really cool. And so then what?
So went through high school, struggled through a couple auditions, continued to do that same band camp every year,
Mhm.
and improved constantly. And then hit hit my senior year, and I'm like, okay, do I want to go into music, or do I want to go into, I had a lot of interest in chemistry and some sciences. So I went to a community college, and small community college in Dodge City, s- really like lit the fire of the interest of classical music and some of the history and theory. And I was very fortunate to have a theory class where there was only 3 people in it. So there was a lot of one-on-one time and solidifying skills. And if I got ahead, it wasn't so much you're causing problems, you're ahead. It's okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk about these more in-depth extended chords and Neapolitan chords, and let's talk about these different styles. And started learning about styles, fell in love with minimalism and modern music, and kept on going. So I only spent one semester at that college. Then I transferred a lot, Lisa. So I transferred to another community college that had a slightly bigger program. And what was sad was they didn't have an oboe teacher there, and they wouldn't allow you. It was the only college I went to that would not allow you to double. So you couldn't take lessons. You couldn't take lessons in more than one um thing. And my advisor had me do voice lessons,
Mm.
which I took as well, I can refine my skills vocally to help me perform as an oboist, because I had at that point had learned from some other lessons I had taken. If you can't sing it,
Yeah.
then how are you going to play it?
Right.
And also learned I can keep myself from getting fatigued and practice a lot more if I can sing my pieces.
Hmm.
So I went ahead and took voice lessons at that college, and I would go to Friends University once every other week, or when I can afford it, to take lessons on oboe, which I would eventually transfer to Friends University for just a year.
Hmm.
So I spent a year at Friends University, got to playing some really high level music for the first time in my life, because other than with getting gigs where I could get them, my oboe teacher actually got selected to play in the pit orchestra for Wicked and said, "Hey, do you want to shadow with me?" And so I got to just sit there and shadow her in the pit for Wicked when it came into town, and then picked up several um, local pit orchestra gigs around the area. And then that's when I had to learn more instruments, because they give you read part 5, and yeah, you have oboe and English horn in it, but then they throw some clarinet at you. And I looked at this director and I said, "I don't play clarinet." And he says, "Oh, okay." And he turns around, grabs a clarinet, hands it to me, and says, "I'll see you in rehearsal on Friday." So
You do now.
yes, I do now. I do now. Um, but spent my year in the Wichita area and in my hometown of Hutchinson, where my family had moved at that point, picking up some just gigs here and there, mostly pit orchestra, mostly community bands, some orchestra gigs. And then after that first year at Friends University, I decided to transfer to OU. And that was a big shocker for me, because I had always been able to just pick up a gig because somebody knew me, and they're like, "Oh, you play oboe and you're good at it? Here, let's let's hire you to play this."
Mhm.
And I go to from a studio where it was only 3 of us to a studio of, if I remember right, 14 students, 8 of those being undergrads, the rest being graduate students and post-grad students getting their DMAs. And was very, very, like, shocked, because I was like, "I am not good at this," is what I thought. And I was told, and then Dr. Schwartz very kindly was like, "No, you're good. You're just at a different level of your path than everyone else is." So I was like, I want to get better so I can actually keep up with like some of my goal as a transfer student, as an undergrad, was I would like to be able to play with the master students
Mhm.
and keep up. And fortunately, I had one master student who every single day, at least for the beginning of the school year, and then it lowered down to like twice a week, would shoot a text out to the whole studio and say, "Hey, who wants to warm up for the day with me?" And we would meet, and it was basically like getting coffee in the morning, but we would meet and we'd just play scales and do fundamentals and connect that way. And made me learn that that was my time of learning that practice can be fun,
Right.
and scales can be fun. And it it was a point where I was discouraged, and then I picked myself back up, and I was like, "Oh, oboe is fun. I am a good." And the big thing that a lot of everybody in that studio started to get towards was having the attitude of, just say you are a good oboist, or I make good reads,
Mhm.
which reads is what got me to where I am now, was just this interest of, this is one small piece that causes the larger whole to function.
Right.
And it builds, it builds a connection that just seems special
Mhm.
to the instrument and makes the instrument more of an extension because you've made it personalized to you.
Right.
And I like the joke when I talk about my reads of my soft read might be too soft for you because I would like to be able to roll my window down on my car, stick my reed out, and it'll play the oboe Mozart concerto for you, which is fun. But I was at OU as an education major, and then 2020 hit, and and our oboe teacher had moved on to he had actually moved to the Chicago area at that point. So new oboe teacher and doing lessons through a screen and trying to learn how to teach music through a screen. And I hit this wall where I'm like, I'd rather be playing my instrument and I don't have the heart that I see these educators
Mhm.
to have to adapt to this online format
Mhm.
and start to slip up in specifically my ed classes, but thrived in my performance-based classes and my musicology classes and anything that had to do with history and theory and thrived in that. And towards the end of that semester, I got a text message from my oboe professor and said, "Hey, I don't think ed is working out for you." And then I shot a text message back to him and said, "Yeah, I think you're right. Can we talk about what I would like to do?" And so I had hit this split where I'm like, I've always been interested in repair.
Mhm.
And in fact, we had my interest in that started when I was in high school because we had these assignments where they actually checked over the cleanliness of our instruments.
Oh.
And everybody in my section, everyone in the flute section and the clarinet section, I'd get people coming to me and said, "Hey, I will pay you $10 to just wipe down and clean my instrument and make it look nice so I can pass this." And I was like, "Sure." So I would sit there in the cafeteria before school and polish keys without removing stuff and would look at how things function. As I've always had this interest in how do things function. My my mother grew up in a junkyard, so I always got to tinker around with things. So I've always tinkered with things, and I did get in trouble because I took my flute apart once without supervision and threw it back together. And I'm like, "Oh no, this doesn't work." And then had to go take it to the repair shop and was told, "Yeah, don't do that.
Right.
Don't do that. Let us do that." And the gentleman repaired a few things, but I was also noticing because in my hometown of Dot City, I had noticed that our music store had shut down there, and then was noticing how many music stores we lost during the pandemic,
Yeah.
which was sad to me. And I saw a need, and was talking to some of the other band directors in that area, and they're like, "Yeah, our nearest repair shop is 3 hours away, 4 hours away," and the Cincinnati road rep can only do so much. The music and arts road reps can only do so much when there's such a big, wide area to go over. And so I sat there, changed my degree to performance, and then started looking for an apprenticeship
Mhm.
in two different options. And I went whoever is willing to take me on first. I'm going with. So my first option was instrument repair, and then my second option was sound engineering
Mhm.
because I have huge interest in that and sent tons of emails out and eventually um landed with Christina's card at the Tuneful Tech, who I work for now, and I've worked for about 3.5 years, almost 4 years now.
That's amazing. I remember when
Yeah,
you said, mhm.
yeah. And she was a little bit on the fence. I'm like, no, I want to pay for lessons to learn to learn the skill because I understand this is a skill.
Right.
And and she started me out on clarinets, and I came in with a crappy Bundy clarinet that I picked up at a garage sale or a thrift store for $10 and tore it down, stripped it down, she basically started me out with a mechanical overhaul. So I learned everything from swedging the keys and refitting the key to refit the keys and setting pads. And it I was going in once a week for a lesson and then paying her for bench time and then going in and practicing this. And I believe I got through 3 clarinets before she offered me a job. And then I took on the job there. So I started with 2 clarinets and then I got to take apart my oboe for the first time that year because I said, I need a cleaning on my oboe, but I can't afford to drop the cost of a cleaning. Can I take it apart and do the prep work for you? And took it apart. And that had me hooked. It was a kind of an addiction at that point because it felt taking apart an instrument to me feels like working on a functional puzzle and using every problem solving skill and understanding the instrument as much as you possibly can.
Mhm.
And just by understanding it more for me makes me feel more of a connection to it when I play it. And my favorite part is always to say to people was the best part is when I'm done, I get to play it. And that's that's the appealing part is how many jobs are there out there other than in the field of music where you get to say the term I played.
Right.
I played this. Hmm.
That's great. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Were you good at other things besides music? I mean, obviously your family was very involved in music, but what made was it just because your family was so involved that made music the thing or you know?
So I actually did theater a lot. I was a theater kid and I also did a lot of set building and set design. So I had a lot of interest in building sets and I actually was at I think my junior year I was considering actually going to school for theater
Mhm.
and just did not like the environment that was there as much. And every time I took an interest in something else, and actually when I started college, I wasn't a music major that first semester. I was a biochem major. So I took probably 8 chemistry classes over the summer. And then I was taking music theory class because it interested me and taking all of those. So I didn't start out directly as that. I also had a massive interest in history, and I still do. It's just now geared towards music history. And right now, my interest is what caused our instruments to get this way? Like, what was going on technology wise? And enjoy reading those books. Like, right now, my pastime is looking at the development of the saxophone from the original Adolph sax
Mhm.
model to what we have now with these amazing engineered like feats of engineering with the saxophone and all the little things that have changed on the oboe because there's so many small things that have changed. Like you don't need a third octave key to play high on oboe, but it sure as heck helps.
Mhm.
Um, but history was a big thing that really intrigued me, so I did take a crack at taking a bunch of history classes because I thought maybe I'll be a history teacher one day or work at a museum because my first job other than playing in the city band was working at a museum and doing
Oh.
tours and helping set up some of the exhibits. I actually helped set up an exhibit about the city band that I played with while I was working at that museum because we were called the Dodge City municipal band was called the Cowboy Band because Dodge City, wickedest little city in the West, all of that. So had a always had an interest in history and a bit of science and chemistry, but something always kept on pulling me back to music. And I actually was trying really hard to avoid going into music because my dad is a is a musician and because my dad is a band teacher. I actually tried to avoid it and then eventually I accepted it and found my own path within that.
Mhm. That's awesome. If somebody was listening to this and was really inspired by your story, what would you say to them to choose to try to play a wind instrument?
I would tell them give it a try and even if there's a struggle with your start, not everyone, there's not always one clear path for everyone. You can pick up one instrument, and one person can pick up one instrument and play it beautifully and figure it out really quickly, like I did when I first started out. But you can also I have several friends who struggled at first and struggled, and their path in playing a wind instrument was, but it's fun. Like once you figure out it's fun.
Yeah,
Hmm.
sure. Your story is amazing. I'm so pleased that you have found Christina and Christina has found you and that you're working together because Christina's awesome and she deserves great people around her, as do you. And I just want to say congratulations.